Business Ethics Case Competition, the premier business ethics case competition in the world. We have people coming over the years from many different countries. And of course, we love having people from Canada especially. So we're glad to have you. And my name is Jim Arnold. And as Tom said, I am your Uber judge or your senior judge. There are 7 of us Uber judges. We've all been with IBEC for a long, long time, which is just a very nice way of saying we're all very old. I myself have been with IBEC since 2006, so that's about 15 years now. And our judges have been with us for a while too, and we'll have them introduce themselves. I'm a professor of management and communication at the University of St. Thomas in Minneapolis, and also am one of the founding faculty members of the full-time MBA program there. And so I am seeing you from Minneapolis today. That's a little about me. Let's go around and have our judges introduce themselves. We have a great panel of judges, 3 judges today who have extensive experience in areas surrounding business ethics and compliance. They've been with us a while, and we're just thrilled that they joined us once again. So Shabani, would you start?
Hello, everyone. Great to meet you. My name is Shabani Nag, and I'm currently located in the Sacramento, California area, so Pacific Standard up in here. And I'm so excited for all of you. This is, like I was mentioning, you might have heard earlier when you joined, that I was a participant back in 2006 as part of one of the grad school teams, and we were the divisional champions. And, and it was such an awesome experience. And since then, I've been a judge, obviously since 2006 or 7 now, every year, and it's something that I very much look forward to. So I hope you have a great time. I know that virtually doing this with COVID going on is, kudos to you for doing that and for still finding a way. I think that's amazing. It's a very important topic to find space for. My background is in change management and organizational culture. So as you can imagine, when talking about ethics, and in a business environment, building trust and as it relates to culture always plays in. And I can tell you that a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve here in this contest are things that I've now experienced for the last 15 years in real life. And so it's real, you'll get to really solve it, when you get out there again. And I just hope you enjoy your time. If you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. But otherwise, great to meet you and good luck.
Great, thank you. Nuria.
Hi, good evening from The Hague in the Netherlands. I think that for you it's afternoon, for me it's in the evening. First of all, please let me thank you for letting me be here today. It's a great pleasure and honor to can have here during this presentation. First of all, because I follow the activities made by the International Business Ethics Case Competition, but mainly because it's a pleasure to me see that so young people at the university are really concerned and aware about ethical implications of the legal or financial decisions made by a company. So for me, that after 25 years of professional career, see that young people is making a big change as you are going to do is really pleased to see and to listen. I am sure that I'm going to enjoy the presentation as I enjoy the video you upload with the presentation of the team. I really enjoy it and my family will enjoy it too, if I have to say. So thank you very much for that. And just in order to let you know who I am, I'm Spanish. I have a professional career of more or less 25 years, mainly in tax and financial matters, working for different sectors. I have worked for energy company, real estate company, or food and beverages, always in international environment. And in the last 5-6 years, I really focused on ethics and compliance. For me, is probably one of the most important parts in a company. If you do business, but if you don't do based on ethics, I think that it doesn't make sense. So now I'm living in The Hague in the Netherlands for the last 2 years. And next summer I'm going back to Spain, thanks God. So please let me know what you are going to do from now. I'm not Nuria professional. I'm Nuria, part of the senior manager team at Google. So please, I want to know what the problem is and what the proposal of solution is too. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Nuria. And Irina, you last person.
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to join. It's the second year I'm joining, and actually that only has been made possible because of COVID pandemic. So looking for positives anywhere. And here I am, second year in a row, really enjoying very much the competition itself. So absolutely pleased to share with you this day. The fun fact: I'm normally based in Warsaw, but today I'm joining from Dubai. It's 11 in the afternoon here. Sorry, I'm not supposed to be sleeping with such an exciting team. With your video is showing everything, so it should be fine. But anyway, I'm absolutely grateful that I can take part in it, and I share what Shibani and Nuria were saying. I'm very excited to see students doing this work, and for me, I was so impressed after the last year when I first time heard how much importance the teams are giving to this topic. I'm with ethics and compliance currently for 6 years. I'm ethics and compliance director at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare, responsible for Central and Eastern Europe, which is 30 Central and Eastern European countries in total. And also, I'm currently on assignment as a customer marketing lead just for development opportunities. And I noticed that actually you guys have all different studies you're undertaking, so it was quite interesting to see, because initially I thought it's like more for those who study ethics and compliance, and that makes it even more impressive that you care, right? So my background is legal. I studied as I have Masters of Law, and I worked as legal for 10 years, and now similar years I'm working as ethics and compliance, and I have always been working in international companies, different industries, also food and beverage, and also cosmetics, and now consumer healthcare. So guys, I'm looking forward to hear your presentation, and I'm sure it will be very interesting. I personally very much excited about the topic you have selected. So let's see what you have prepared for us. Looking forward to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. We have a very, very, very important person in the room while IBET goes online, and that's our technology expert, who is Ravi. Ravi, will you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ravi Rajan, and I've went to Loyola Marymount University, where I've met Tom there and known him since 1996 when I helped out at the inaugural event. So I'm probably dating myself and giving away my age, but yeah, we worked together a long time. And back in the days when it was a biathlon, so we would start at 4 a.m. on Saturday mornings by preparing the course for runners to go through, and then have the award ceremony the evening. I live in Santa Barbara, California, and I work as a storage engineer at Raytheon. If you guys have any problems during this, I'm going to put my number in the chat window for anybody. So feel free to either text or call me. You probably want to jot it down before, after I put it in, just in case you do get knocked out and you need to get in touch with me. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you, Ravi. Well, as you can tell, student team, we are all very, very excited. We all love IBEC, and we're all very happy to be here, and we're very excited to see your presentation. Let's move on and have each of you introduce yourselves very quickly. Just tell us your major and when you're graduating, and anything else you want to tell us. We'll just let you run it on your own.
Sure, I'll start us off. My name is Tara Flatt. I am a marketing and MIS major, so management information systems. I got into it very late in university, but I developed a passion for technology kind of out of nowhere. I'm actually graduating this upcoming May, or like right around the corner. So I finished my last day of classes this past Wednesday. I'm very excited to kind of start a new chapter of my life, and I'll pass it over to Haley next.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So my name is Haley Yamamoto. I am a 5th year student. I am also graduating very shortly. I'm actually supposed to be in my last class right now. So glad to be here though. Last class of my degree, a nice way to go out. I'm majoring in marketing and human resources. And I will pass off to Lauren to go next.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Sligers. I am in my 4th year of university. I have 1 year left, and I have a major of human resources and leadership. I'm really passionate about governance of organizations and sort of the policy and the internal workings of them. And I will pass it off to Gurkamal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gurkamal Dhaliwal. I'm a 4th year student doing double major in finance and accounting. And I like helping people, and I think this competition is a lot about that. So that's why I'm here, and thank you for this opportunity. And now I will pass it on to Siddhant.
Hi everyone, glad to be here. My name is Siddhant Sharma. I am also in my final year at the Asper School of Business, majoring in finance and management information systems as well. I will be graduating at the end of summer, so very close to Tara and Haley, and looking forward to what the world of ethics has to offer in the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We have read your executive summaries, and now we are going to be jumping into the roles that you've assigned. We see that our role is as the Google Senior Management Team. Is that still correct? Who is on the Google Senior Management Team, just so we can be exact on this? Just give us a couple of things. VPs? Yes. Are we VPs or are we?
Yeah, so that includes, of course, the CEO is part of the senior management team, and then we also have all of the VPs and also the leads of the respective areas. So the lead of AI, the lead of Google Research, the lead of Google Brain, and sort of all of those individual areas. And of course, finance and operations and all of those.
Great, so we're all very rich and get paid a lot. Nice. And tell me about your role as the team. Who are you now?
We will be taking on a consultancy type role. So we're an external consultancy coming in to help resolve the issue.
Okay, great. You are external consultants. Excellent. We start by reading the same paragraph to every competing team. And just so we have everybody on the same place to start. You've seen this before on our website, but again, we just do this for everybody. In this part of the competition, you are taking on a fictional business identity and assigning a fictional business identity to the judges. Please make sure everyone knows who you are and who they are before you begin. We've done that. You will have 25 minutes with a 5-minute cushion to speak, so 30 minutes, and to describe the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem, and to recommend a solution that passes muster on all 3 of those counts. During this time, you will be uninterrupted. We will not be interrupting you as your judges. At 30 minutes, if you're still talking, I'll just say time's up and you'll need to get in the last couple of sentences and finish. When we're finished, the judges will ask you questions for about 20 minutes. And again, we will be in our role. During the Q&A, both you and the judges are going to stay in character. After the Q&A, we're going to take those hats off and we're going to just become regular people again. We're going to give you some feedback on your presentation and on your analysis. Now, some important things to keep in mind. The ethical aspects of your analysis are the most important part. However, these should be described in simple, practical, common sense fashion. Using technical philosophy, terminology, or basing your argument on religious or theological grounds will be considered a serious weakness. During this presentation, every member of the team must have a speaking role, and we'd appreciate it during Q&A if each of you would weigh in at least once as well. And also, when you speak, you're going to be spotlighted. Ravi is going to be taking care of that. And so you will be the only person on the screen. You will not see the judges speaking at all. And Ravi will also take care of seeing that your screen share works and everything like that. And then finally, if you were with us live, as we hope you will be someday, you'd be making eye contact with us as your judges. So what we'd like you to do today is look into the camera when you speak to us. You'll see so often on Zoom meetings that people are looking down at the screen. They think they're making eye contact because they're looking at people. But the fact is you're not. So we would really appreciate your looking into the camera when you speak. Do you have any questions before we get going? Ravi, are you ready? Robbie is ready? Okay, sounds great. Welcome to IBEC once again. We're so glad to have you, and please begin when you are ready.
Just confirming, is everybody able to see my slides?
Correct, yes.
Perfect. Let's get all organized here before we get started. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, strategic management team of Google. I am incredibly honored, and I can speak for the rest of my team, that you have trusted us with this situation that you found yourself in. My name is Tara, and I'm joined by the rest of my team, Siddhant, Lauren, Haley, and Gurkamal, and together we are a consultancy representing the Asper School of Business. We understand that this is an incredibly critical time for your organization. And again, we're very honored that you've trusted us with this high responsibility to help Google balance perspectives, progress, and purpose. To give you a brief overview of what we're going to be walking through today, we're going to start by identifying the match that really sparked the issue that we're going to be discussing. We're going to then expand that problem and look at a broader scope of how it applies to Google as an organization. Next, we'll be walking through the financial and the business case of looking at how this problem interacts with business at Google. We'll also be considering some legal implications, and from the last part of our analysis, we'll be looking at the ethical dimensions to the problem. We also want to take a look at the big picture of what really is happening and Google's role in society as a whole. After we complete that, we'll be walking into the recommendation and the implementation, and lastly, we'll be showing you the impact of what this is all going to achieve. Before jumping in too deep, we really wanted to start off and set the tone for this conversation today. And starting with a quote in saying that all great changes are preceded by chaos. We understand that within Google, of a company of that scale and of that nature, there is so much chaos that surrounds all of the amazing things the organization is doing. However, today we really want to focus in on the match that sparked the issues that Google is facing today, and really the issue that you've called us in to help solve.
And that issue is the exit of Timnit Gebru. Timnit was, of course, a member of your ethical AI team at Google. She was a very well-respected member of the AI community at large. And her exit came after submitting a paper that was critical of some of the AI features that were being put forward and used in Google's processes. And this sparked huge backlash from the AI community. And so just to make sure that we're all on the same page, we want to walk through a bit of a timeline of the events that came to this point. So in September of 2018, your organization created this wonderful new ethical AI team that was led by both Gebru and Margaret Mitchell, another member. And this team worked like a family. They got along very well. They pioneered some great new ideas in the ethical AI space. But then in October of 2020, Gebru became cautious of a certain use of this technology and the AI that was being used. And she wrote a research paper with another author and went to your approval team to have that research paper approved. In December of 2020, having that paper not been approved and the research team saying that she needed to take her name off of it if she wanted to publish it, she spoke out to other employees in the organization, and the day after left the organization. Now, the organization you have gone and put together this investigation. So there has been outcry from the AI community by other employees in the organization, and you thought that an internal investigation would help solve that. And there was policy changes that were made from that, and that was great to see, but it hasn't gone as far as it needs to go. And so we see that where we are right now in April, that there have been prominent members of that ethical AI team who have still left in protest despite the changes that have been made. We see that the co-leader of the original team has been fired. And we also see that the supervisor of this ethical AI team has decided to leave the organization as well. So we wonder what this all leads to.
So we asked the question, why did the internal investigation and policy changes not help to resolve the employee and public concerns? The real issue is that the investigation was treating the symptoms of the issue, but not the root problem itself. But what is the root problem?
So after this first case, we wanted to ensure due diligence in really investigating whether there was more to this issue than just the case with Timit. So we took to the internet, we wanted to understand if there was anything else. We took to your internal resources, and we found that just a shocking slew of different issues that had arisen, and so many things that employees had brought forward, and concerns, and issues with not voicing their opinions. You can see that 3 years of misery inside of Google, that is supposed to be the happiest company in the world. And we found this incredibly concerning and surprising. So we wanted to get to the root of, what trends were found between these articles, and what was really the core message of what these employees were speaking to.
As Tara mentioned, these instances that we're seeing within the AI team are not the sole instances. There have been numerous instances of mistreatment of employees across the company. And what this points to is a widespread issue that has its seeds spread across Google. Employees are unable to express their pro-diversity statements for they fear being fired. The voice that workers possess is not being respected or heard. There's no room whatsoever for internal conversation. And what this refers to broadly is an unfit and negative workplace culture.
And so we took that case that we had initially been brought in to look at, and we really defined a problem around it, and that this is something much more widespread than just an issue on the AI team. This is something that does not live exclusively within that one case, but rather this is a culture issue at Google as a whole, as employees are feeling as though they're being silenced and that their opinions and their voices are not being heard.
And this may seem like just an internal problem, but it really has these larger external impacts that come from it. So we see that with this outcry that's occurred, there's been a tarnished brand. And so you might, as an organization, you might not be attracting those same employees that wanted to work with you before. The research credibility is being damaged. So when someone speaks out and wants to write this paper and they're told that their paper can't be put forward, the community is going to ask, why can't that paper be published, and can we trust the papers and the research that is coming out of Google? And finally, you're losing these wonderful, qualified, capable leaders that are making huge changes outside of the organization, and you're losing that ability to have them inside the organization. But what this all really ties to is the intellectual property that you rely on as an organization to really succeed and drive that innovation.
Now the question is, why does Google need the best of the best? Google's business is driven by innovation. More than $20 billion of intellectual property is driving the financial bottom line. However, the intellectual property Google's employees generate is going to be impacted if your employees do not have the ability to actively speak up and critique their products.
And what this really boils down to, when you pair this, more recent employee dissatisfaction and the perceptions of negative culture with this really high dependence on intellectual property to drive Google as a business, it creates this really intense risk of a loss of competitive advantage through slow erosion. If over time your employees aren't able to speak out about things that they feel passionate about, that's going to impact not only the quality of your intellectual property, but also what is going out into the world from Google. And over the long term, this is going to impact that core business model. So it's certainly a large risk that we wanted to keep in mind as we want a breadthful and rich future of research for Google.
Now we look at 4 key costs of poor organizational culture. Number 1 is negative public perception. Poor organizational culture has resulted in frequent negative news for Google, which is affecting Google's public image. Number 2 is cost of losing talent. Google wants to hire only the very best people from the industry. However, the median tenure of an employee at Google is only 1.2 years. Clearly, the best talent feels Google is not the best place for them. Number 3 is increased cost of research and development. You are spending billions of dollars every year to build and train your research and development team. Your research and development expense has gone up from $12.3 billion in 2015 to $27.6 billion in 2020. However, the poor organizational culture is reducing the productivity of your R&D team. And number 4 is legal cost. Google is very much aware of the legality of its business in all dimensions. You have hired a large workforce to tackle with the problems which come in your path to innovation. You are spending millions of dollars to tackle and anticipate any legal problems. But in the newly developing technology like AI, the legal cost could be huge when the regulations become more apparent. Therefore, Google needs to be more careful about its decisions and the impact it has on its organizational culture.
There's multiple sides to this story, and lots has been said in the news and media about what is true. Timnit Gebru stepped forward, stating that she was fired from Google in an unjust manner and that she was well within her rights to raise a question about the research paper. We understand that you're unable to share specific details about the case as it is sensitive internal information. However, we have evaluated the situation as if it was a firing, and here's what we researched and analyzed. The main issue here is that Timnit Gebru claims to have received dehumanizing treatment during her time at Google. And our research shows that as we took a look at the dismissal from a legal standpoint, it is important to keep in mind that all the employee rights at Google are determined by US case law, the US labor legislation, as well as by the terms and conditions that was included in her employee contract. Having looked at labor law, we can safely establish that Google were well within their rights to fire Timnit and were acting in a legal manner. Timnit clearly refused to follow the message of her managers and was fired for insubordination and the unwillingness to censor the report. There was a comment made by Gebru where she said her managers told her that the email had reflected behavior that is inconsistent with the expectations of the manager. This does not in any way indicate discrimination, thus proving that Timnit has a very weak case from a legal standpoint. She does not have any basis for the lawsuit, and this proves that Google acted along with the letter of the law during this situation and followed all applicable laws. Is there a likelihood of lawsuits that would arise from this situation? As Timnit does not have a legal base for her to take this to court, it is more likely that she could file a complaint with the Department of Fair Employment and Housing in California or the US Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. Moving on to a more broader aspect, there have been numerous instances relating to employees that have worked for Google, where there have been cases of harassment or discrimination. A software engineer was fired for simply putting up posts internally that were pro-diversity. A bit of a famous one is the James Damore firing, who was fired for expressing his views about Google's diversity policies. And more importantly, and a more commonly known instance was the 2018 worldwide walkout, where there was global protests against the sexual misconduct allegations that had been filed against a lot of the senior management teams across Google. These are concerns, and there's a chance of history repeating itself, which would damage Google in a negative light. These instances hold weight and demonstrate the frustration that your employees are currently feeling, but more importantly, it represents the threat that Google might be facing in the next little bit. And that threat could be in the form of class action lawsuits. With so many more instances of harassment that have taken place, a class of former employees who have left the company could be formed, leading to a suit against Google, which would ultimately damage your reputation. What we tend to see, however, is that individual employees do not tend to file a civil lawsuit against the company just due to the nature of Google's influence and power. And while we have talked about laws that surround the Timnit Gebru incident and looked at laws from a broader perspective as well, Google currently is not breaking any laws, and thus the law is not of concern here. But however, the conversation is not always about legality. Google at the moment is right at the fence between legal and illegal. Whilst they are following all legal procedures, they are not being ethical in their actions, and that is the key focus here.
And so we see that running a business is, of course, more than just obeying the law. And there's a spectrum in which companies can fall, everything from amoral, where there's complete disregard for the law and anything goes, all the way up to that really ultimate goal, which is an ethical business that integrates ethics into the core of the work that they do. And when we look at where you, Google, as an organization fall, we believe that you're still in that legalistic phase. So right now you are complying with the law, you're within that compliance, and there's been a few instances where there's been efforts made to be responsive to the stakeholders. So with the Timnit Gebru firing, we see that you did this internal review, but we don't believe you've gotten to that next point yet. And so what's great about this is that there's an amazing opportunity for you to grow from this and for you to expand your ethical business practices.
And so the big question becomes, why is it that Google, as an industry leader in so many ways, is not where it should be or where it ought to be on this spectrum? And like any evaluation of this nature, we wanted to start at the root of it, which is the values that Google puts out for employees. These are public for customers, for other stakeholders. And we really wanted to start by understanding what exactly the expectations were of employees and how they could identify with these values. And from a theoretical perspective, Google's values completely align with their business model. They want employees who can do one thing really, really well. As an organization, Google has done one thing really, really well, and it's been incredibly profitable and a great business model for the organization. Additionally, these best of the best that are coming in objectively should be fast workers. They should be, eager to finish projects and to complete good work. We also see that these people want to work ethically and work within line with their values, and also always strive for great and that excellence. So again, from a theoretical perspective, this makes complete sense. However, the challenge becomes when you try to apply these values to a more practical and actually apply these to day-to-day work, there is dissonance. So how can you be fast and great and ethical and do one thing really, really well, but be creative and innovative? And what it leads to is a dissonance in employee decisions, and a confusion in how you can look at this conflict between values and prioritize it. So an example could be an employee who's looking at their day-to-day work and saying, okay, I need to be great, but what if that means I have to do things a little bit slower? And potentially it means the timeline has to be extended to do that level of excellence. I need to be fast, but what if it involves acting unethically? What if I have to, cut a few corners to get there and to meet the timeline? Or I'm supposed to do one thing really, really well, but what about my innovation and my creativity and that thought generation and that leadership? So again, you can see from these examples the confusion that happens in the day-to-day process of all levels of employees, right down from just any employee in the organization to a senior manager.
And we see that beyond just the confusion between these values, this is actually creating ethical dilemmas for the employees themselves. So when you're right at the deadline of a project that needs to be done and an employee finds out that there's a flaw in the program that they're building that could cause ethical implications, maybe biases like what Tim McGevru brought forward, is that employee going to speak up, or are they going to hold back in the interest of being fast instead of slow? And so these ethical dilemmas really stem from the idea of tangible versus intangible aspects. So right now, employees are being measured and they're being rewarded and they're being promoted based on really tangible measures. So are they completing projects quickly? Are they meeting their deadlines? Are they producing more and new and better quality products or research? And so that's really easy to measure. And so employees are going to prioritize that over some of the potentially more important aspects, which are the intangibles. So as an organization, you use a term called googliness, which is the extent to which someone embodies the values. But the difficulty with that is that if the values aren't clear, the employees aren't going to be able to understand what googliness actually means. And ethical conduct is hard to measure, hard to really define. So employees at the end of the day are going to put more weight on those tangible measures that they know are going to get them those promotions and get them further in the organization. And further than just that prioritization for employees, when the values were created, they were created to drive this freight train of innovation that Google has become. But now that dissonance is leading to some of that innovation being silenced, where people are not expanding on their ideas because it's easier to fit the deadline if you go into a really narrow scope. And so what this really is leading to is this stunted innovation where larger questions aren't being asked and people aren't expanding on their ideas. And so this is really actually working against the mission that you've created of this innovation.
And to look at this from the broadest scope, Google values our values. Google plays such a significant role in everything we do in our day-to-day lives, and they shape our society in so many facets. At Google, you really set the tone for so many industries. And this power and this, innovation, this holds a responsibility, and Google holds a responsibility within society to do the right thing. Google has always put forward this idea of do no evil. So the risk that Google holds and you hold at Google is if you silence your employees and you act unethically, that brings these unethical practices into all things in our society. It sets the example for other organizations, and that holds a huge risk. Additionally, if you're not letting employees be critical of the work, that can actually hold a detrimental risk to society. When you look at AI being used in autonomous vehicles, that's something that has human lives on the line. It's not just financial impact, it's humanity as we know it. And if you look at it from a positive light, you can also say this is an opportunity. Google has the opportunity that if they enable ethical employees to speak up and to find these critical developments and to innovate in that way, Google is creating a more ethical tomorrow for the world. So when we think about, again, this chaos, we've now established what this chaos is, where the priorities fall. We're excited now to present that change to you and what is really going to help Google to get to this next step.
Now, to spark this change, our recommendation is to prioritize and align your organizational values. This process involves 3 pillars. So first, reevaluating your values and priorities. Second, integrating your values into internal processes and evaluations. And finally, fostering a continuous ethical culture going forward. Now, we understand that this may seem like a very daunting endeavor. However, don't worry, we have broken it down. Each pillar has individual actions that you can take to ensure the success.
We want you to look at some key performance indicators to measure the impact the recommendations will have on your business. For legal perspective, we want you to look at the number of settlements instances. For financial perspective, we want you to look at the return on your intellectual property. And for ethical perspective, we want you to look at the number of ethical issues resolved and the impact on median tenure of the employees.
Now, it's also important for you as senior managers to begin talking the talk. That is the first step. As the old saying goes, the first step in solving a problem is recognizing that there is one. So the best place to start is with acknowledging that there is a misalignment in Google's values, and then communicating this with employees. So there's a common understanding of the issue across the entire organization. You will also need to demonstrate your commitment as leaders to making improvements and taking action to solve this problem. It's your responsibility as the senior leadership team to open the conversation about values with your teams, and then begin to spread accountability for the actions needed to realign the values across the entire organization. All of Google's values are incredibly important. So we believe that the issue at hand is helping employees to determine which values take priority over others in their specific roles. We completely understand that different teams have different priorities. So there's a high need to prioritize the values that best suit the needs of the team. For example, the ethical AI team might prioritize their values in a way that doesn't work for the HR team, which also might not work for the accounting team, who works with very tight deadlines. So maybe for accounting, fast is better than slow to meet payroll deadlines, whereas the ethical AI team might want to take more of a slow approach to really think through and making sure that they're doing good. So setting the values needs to move from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach. Starting with employees really helps them to feel empowered and that they have a legitimate role in saying what the organization that they work for stands for.
And so we believe there's a really actionable way to do that, and that is to have a retreat of sorts with each individual team. So each of you on the senior management team can work within your specific sector and take charge on this. And so this could look, of course, a number of ways, but we could see this as a day-long summit where employees start the day and they can determine their own individual values and which of Google's values are most important to them, and then work up to their work group and which values are important to their work group, and work up to the unit that they work within and the department. And then at the end of the day, you'll get to a place where as a VP, you can know exactly what values are most important to your employees. And you can find that at each individual level. And what that'll really do is allow you as an organization to prioritize what's most important to these employees and also move towards making sure that that reflects in their measurements.
The next step as part of our implementation process is integrate, thus putting all the conversations and ideas that have been discussed as part of our reevaluate pillar into effect. It's one thing to talk the talk, but as leaders, you also need to make the commitment to walking the walk. Main aspect of this is to communicate all our values to all of the employees and to instill a culture and the prevalence of those values, essentially publicizing them and spreading the word by making our values known to all the employees and creating the culture where there's excitement about the values and where employees feel involved and feel listened to as they played a role in selecting these values. This part also has to deal with establishing ethical leaders who will serve as the representatives and ensure that the ethical culture continues to grow and that the employees are constantly reminded of it. And spreading this word can be done through a variety of methods, starting off with giving tangible reminders. An idea that we have is the introduction of laptop cases that have Google's values on them to serve as a constant reminder to all of the employees that these are the values that have been prioritized, have been chosen by them, and directly resonate with the individual who belongs to a particular department. The second step would be to create ethical development opportunities, professional development, workshops, events, and more with the intent of continuing and building the excitement and the buzz about these values, that as well as to get people more and more involved. There would also be an opportunity to join an internal ethics committee that would allow employees to play a more prominent role in the conversation about ethics. And as the senior management team, a perfect example would be at town hall meetings, at departmental meetings. The leadership speaks to the value change that is happening within the company, and you instill that culture within all of the employees, thus walking the walk.
So going a step beyond just communication, the values need to be integrated into the day-to-day actions of every Google employee. An easy way to start is to begin collecting feedback on current internal processes, that research review process, as well as the appeals process, to begin seeing how ethical conduct can be integrated into the day-to-day actions of every employee. Most importantly, the Googliness that Lauren had mentioned earlier will need to be redefined and incorporated into as the values of each team, as opposed to just a lump sum term that is used throughout the organization. So Googliness will have a different meeting to each team based off of their values that they have created together. The performance evaluation process will need to shift from strictly evaluating outcomes to including both processes and outcomes. So not just so knowing how they got there, not just what happened. Finally, we understand that a semi-annual performance evaluation is time consuming and it's not always high on the priority list, especially for those middle managers who are overseeing a lot of employees. Unfortunately, this means that it's not really sufficient to just make immediate changes to the employee's behavior through formal performance evaluations. So we recommend also just listening and using informal methods. You as the senior management team, just taking in the opinions of the employees that work beneath you. So that can be as simple as starting every meeting with listing off the values of the team, or starting off a conversation with questions like, what are your biggest pain points right now? Or what's something that you're struggling with and how can I help you? To really start generating that feedback on a day-to-day informal level. So the next phase of our implementation is walking beyond walking the walk, walking that walk into the future, making sure that this lasts. So a good place to begin with this pillar is celebrating both big and small wins. Now, rewarding behaviors that occur that are very ethical, as well as provoking more ethical behaviors from within the organization. That can come from creating recognition systems, as well as developing creative programming. We understand that Google employees are really encouraged to take some time from their workdays to focus on creativity. However, we know that this can be challenging to maintain. Projects are very busy, deadlines come up, things need to happen to move the business forward. However, with the previous two pillars, we have unlocked the ability to spend more time on creative initiatives. So this just needs to be actively promoted and encouraged by you as senior leaders. Things like creative sprints. So if a project team has about a week between two projects, giving them the opportunity to use that time to spark their creativity and work on a project that they're passionate about. Or even things like innovation competitions, development Olympics, games that really spark creativity within your department.
Your success in implementation will be determined if your number of legal settlements decreases, return on your intellectual property increases, and number of ethical issues resolved increases, and median tenure of your employee increases.
And we think that this will get you to a position where you can get to that active phase of the ethical spectrum, but we think that you can do even better.
And this comes in spreading the wealth. So as Google has been a leader in so much of what they do as an organization, there is an opportunity to make ethics something core to your business model. Look at focusing ethical research and thought leadership on, or focusing on ethics in those areas. It's something Google's done for so many years, and it's a great area of growth. The same way that you can take a digital marketing course online from Google, you should be able to take a digital ethical management course, ethical leadership course, and also accumulate it at an annual Google Ethical Leadership Summit. Opportunities like this really help to, again, drive that forward and set that example within the industry to other players. This is the final step that gets you to that ethical level of complete and high ethical integration.
What will be the impact of this? So if we look at the, if we solve some of the lawsuits which have been filed against Google, or reduce the number of settlements and increase the productivity of employees, because they will know what is the culture of the company like, and they will not have second thoughts about company, then even 1% increase in net income because of the decrease in all these costs can save you around $200 million in the next year if your net income is growing at 9% growth rate. So it will give you 10% as a result. And if you do a little bit more than that and save more costs, then you can grow at 12% growth rate, and which can save you around $600 million.
What we really see is that this ethical impact will be seen around the organization. So not only will you solve these ethical questions and ethical dilemmas that have been faced in the organization, but the bottom line is that employees who have ethics integrated into their everyday work are going to be considering the ethical impacts of everything that they create. So in the end, Google's innovation will expand, it'll be better, and you won't have to worry about the ethical implications because the employees are going to be thinking about that every single day.
So to bring us back to where we started, all great changes are preceded by chaos. We've defined for you today what the chaos is that you're experiencing at Google, from one case with Timnit to a full organizational culture concern, with our recommendation of really realigning and re-strategizing these values, making sure employees can identify with them. You can foster that growth going forward and lead just a full industry change to all these different spaces, creating an ethical world for us all to live in. We would like to thank you so much for your time today, and we are very excited to discuss any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you very much. While Robbie gets us back to everybody being on the screen, I will say to you, thank you very much. You've given the executive team a lot of things to think about. What we're going to do now is let's ask your, are we all back, Robbie?
We're all back. I'm just going to ask whoever started the presentation, can you please close it out? So then, yeah, I may be able to do it. Oh, there we go.
There we
Perfect.
go. Okay, we're all back. So
hey,
let's move on.
Jim, just
yes.
real quick. I'm going to disappear for a second, but we're in standard mode, but I'm listening in. I'm just going to turn my video off for a few minutes so I can get some lunch real quick.
Okay.
If you need anything, I'll be right back in like just a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks, Robbie.
Okay. Thank you.
You deserve to eat too.
Thank you.
Executive team, why don't you just start and ask your questions?
So maybe I can go first, if that's okay. So guys, thank you very much for the presentation. Really quite straightforward way you have presented the issues which we are having as an organization. Number of the things we can recognize indeed, and the suggestions are, many of them are really valid. I wanted to ask you on one question. So practically, you have outlined the quantity of the ethical cases as one of the ways how to determine whether the organization is moving towards the right direction. My question is as follows. So when we see the increase of investigations, of ethical cases, of speak-ups, is it good or bad? That's the question which I wanted to ask you, because you can look at this from different angles, right? From one side, if we see the decrease of the ethical cases, it might mean that speak-up culture doesn't work. From the other standpoint, if we see that, we might think, okay, our organization is improving in terms of our values or ethical behaviors, etc. So what's your take on how to treat the decrease of the ethical cases and why you have outlined this as one of the kind of dimensions? Yeah.
I can
Thank you.
take that question, and thank you so much for asking. It's definitely a good point of clarification. So when we look at ethical cases, these are the formal complaints that aren't being dealt with within the teams. And on that front, we'd like to see that decrease. Evidently, the goal is that Google gets to a level where the culture and everything within the organization is handled within the teams in a very natural way, rather than these becoming formal processes. You know, the ethical cases that are coming forward within the teams, and there are areas that employees can be creative with that can, you know, take that step into innovation. That is the kind of goal that we want to improve. But when it comes to those formal complaints or issues that came up, such that Timnit had experienced, those are aimed to decrease. So it's a little bit of discrepancy there, and I apologize for any confusion, but the goal is, again, yes, exactly that, to increase the internal and natural processing of these kind of issues.
No, absolutely, that makes sense. And thank you very much for providing this clarification. I agree with you that actually moving towards the culture where any issues can be discussed directly with the leadership would make a big difference indeed. So thank you very much for the response taken.
Nuria or Shabani, either one?
Yes, I can. Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. And I would like to know if you have thought about, do you think, taking into account that Google is a multinational with offices in the US, but around the world, in Europe, Asia, you know, with different cultures and different ways to do the things, and maybe different ways to understand ethical problems, do you think that your solution can be put in place in the different offices of Google? Is something that we can use for all the organization?
Yeah, so we believe that, first of all, being able to prioritize the values in each individual area is going to help each sector to sort of determine what's most important to them. And that's sort of where we saw, you know, with Google being such a large organization, it's great to have these values, but it's difficult to say that every single person in every single unit will sort of have the same interpretation. So we believe that once there is this sort of clearer interpretation, it's not necessarily about the employees, you know, understanding whether what they're doing is ethical or not. It's about the structure that we're creating leading to that naturally happening. So it's leading to employees not having to decide whether they should bring up this big concern that they have or not. So sort of in the same way that we've broken down ethics into this sort of really tangible way, you know, legal versus, you know, ethical on that spectrum, employees are going to be able to see that things are going well in their organization, that the way that they've prioritized the values is the way that they're being measured. And so they will see that it's okay to speak up and it's okay to question the work that's being done and it's okay to raise concerns. And so we believe that that's what will really foster that ethical culture. And I'll pass it over to Tara just to add one more point.
I was just going to say as well, with that bottom-up approach, it really starts with each individual employee. So within those teams, every employee is getting the chance to prioritize them. It's then only being elevated to the point of the team, and then to the bigger, broader spectrum. So these ethics and these perspectives and prioritizations are being taken into account from every employee, no matter where you're from, what your culture is. Everybody has the chance to contribute. And it becomes these team priorities, and within these teams, there's a better understanding of where the priorities lie. So even if you have a multinational team from a lot of different parts of the world, that team has its own set of priorities. So it's nice that in that level and that kind of leveled up way, it's going to ultimately end up with, you know, each segment of the business having those priorities that everybody feels like they've contributed to and that align with what they feel is their own personal values.
Okay, great. I fully agree with you. And yes, I think that the contribution that every individual can do, I think can be a great goal for the company. Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'd like to jump in with some thoughts and a question. So I agree with my colleagues, you know, with their thoughts about your recommendations around bottom up and so on. You know, as you were presenting your recommendation, it occurred to me that your idea of bottom up is actually a very radical way of developing culture, right? It's usually, we do one Google, one culture, we set the values, and it goes down through the organization. And my thought process around that was, okay, if I could wrap my head around that for a second, to play devil's advocate, and again, I'd love your thoughts on this, is, are we not setting up the organization for a different type of chaos? In other words, one department over here is going to say that these 3 values are most important to me. And then this department over here, possibly in a different country, which has other cultural implications that develop that culture, say, no, these are important to me. And so that's why, we created a product or a deliverable in this way with this timeline. And they're like, nope, don't agree with you. I think it should be this way and this way. And as you know, in our culture, there's a lot of competition, and there's a lot of project management that happens to cross-coordinate across geographies and departments. And so my concern, and again, it's just more of like an open question to your team, is, are we not developing a different kind of chaos that will create different coordination problems that might get us crossing our wires again, and it might create, again, more people problems and ethical problems behind the scenes? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll start off, and then if anybody else from the team wants to add on, feel free to just let me know. But I think that brings up a really unique question of, what forms of chaos. I think within an organization of Google scale, you're always going to have some form of chaos. It's just there's so many moving parts. And this is a step in the right direction to help empower those employees. And one big component with that value setting exercise is that you as the senior management team, before they get publicized, before they're released, there's going to be conversations amongst your groups to understand and make sure there's not direct conflicts, because that certainly would cause a problem. If you have 2 teams that work together super regularly, and all of a sudden one of them is only focused on going fast and one of them is only focused on being great, that definitely would cause a problem. And I think the goal with this value evaluation is that employees are realistic people. They want to be heard, but they're not coming with these unrealistic, crazy expectations. So they're reasonable in the way of understanding that a lot of their role, there is this balance. And that's why we still think all 10 values should be interpreted and adopted by employees, because they're all goals that you should strive for. But it's just a matter of understanding when you hit those ethical dilemmas where you can focus. And if there are those direct conflicts, those can be conversations amongst the management when you're working up that ladder. And then maybe it's going back to the team. And again, that transparency piece is the big part, making the team feel involved, that you can sit back down with your team and say, I understand that this is our priority. Do we think we could adopt this to be able to work with X team or Y team? So there is that, I guess it's a lot of communication. And I know that can be a challenge in a big organization, but it's so crucial to create that trust that's so central to the employees right now and what they're really lacking in their overall day-to-days right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I think if we can integrate some kind of governance structure, maybe at the launch of every project or something, some kind of checkpoint, as you had mentioned, right, where there's conversations at the leadership level, then it's also an opportunity for us as leaders to step forward and provide leadership where there isn't any clarity. And I think that's a great point that you bring up as a way to kind of guide and facilitate that process. So thank you for those thoughts.
I have a question for either of our 2 guys or Haley, one of the 3 of you. Given what you've talked about and what you'd like to see implemented, how might the James Damore case have turned out differently if under what you're proposing?
I think that's a great point. The one reason our recommendation takes care of the James Damore filing is it's all about establishing that open culture where employees can feel listened to. Because looking at the specific James Damore filing, when that happened, I'm sorry, I'm just going to pull up the slide real quick. Looking at the James Damore firing when it happened, he was fired for expressing his views about the diversity policy. So that points to the fact that even though there were all these values were not clearly communicated to all of the employees, and they didn't understand the full interpretation of it. But now with our recommendation, employees are able to contribute to the values and have a clear understanding of it. So they're prioritizing the values that they most resonate with. And with the input of the senior management, they're able to create that culture where they can speak up to their managers without the risk of, they can speak up to senior leaders without worrying about the fact that they might be fired. Once again, pointing to that open culture and creating that room for conversations, that internal conversations to happen. So if this recommendation was to go through, looking at the James Damore firing, this would be more of a conversation about, hear your thoughts. How can we change them? Is that something pointing to a value within Google that needs to be changed? Because our recommendation builds upon having these conversations in a regular manner. It's not about you have these conversations one and they're done and dusted. You keep that internal forum going on so that concept of ethics can be continuously built upon.
Even though James Damore was clearly sexist in the things that he said, would he still be welcome under your recommendation to express views outwardly that are clearly sexist?
I think this is where it will be a two-way conversation where employees have to be given a platform to voice their opinions, but it has to be a conversation among all employees where if a particular employee believes in a value, but that is not something that Google as a whole agrees with, that the employee also has to be open to be receiving feedback and be able to identify this is the alternate perspective that exists. And that's where you build towards creating an inclusive environment for all. So it's not just saying that employees need to be given a platform and everything that they say is right. The open culture works both ways. So I, as an employee, for example, can have a very open conversation with you as part of the senior management team, and we can bounce ideas off one another.
Other judges, any more questions for the team? Excuse me, other executive team members?
Maybe I would have maybe I would have another question. So you have proposed a wonderful suggestion to integrate the ethical dimension into the performance measures. So how would you exactly see that? And would you see this being applied similarly across the departments, which actually would have, according to the proposal, slightly different set of values? So how would you see this integration into the performance KPIs and ethical dimension KPIs?
In terms of the performance evaluation, Google, we feel actually has a very strong infrastructure for performance evaluations themselves right now. 360-degree feedback, biannually semi-annually, as opposed to just once a year to increase the conversation. Compensation and performance conversations are kept separately. So we feel that the infrastructure in place is actually a very strong launch point. It will just be a matter of changing what employees are evaluated on. So within each team, that Googliness dimension that is currently such a key point within those evaluations would be further broken down into the individual values and then weighted according to their priority on each individual team. And I'll pass it to Gurkamal to continue.
So yes, so looking from the financial perspective, we feel that employees at Google are second guessing right now. The median tenure at Google is 1.1 years for an average employee over there. So they are not sure whether they want to continue working with Google or not. So as a result, there is a lot of hiring expense, which is occurring over the last few years. And also the research and development cost has also gone up because employees are not giving their 100% to the task they are doing, right? So once we have implemented this plan, we can see that R&D will be more productive. They will produce more value out of it, and their cost of hiring will also go down. As a result, it will create value for the stakeholders of Google overall.
Thank you very much for your answers. We are going to move on to the next phase, and we are going to take off our executive team hats, and you can take off your consultant hats. Send us the bill, we will pay you quickly. And we'd like to give you some feedback on your presentation, on your analysis, and hopefully some of this might be helpful as you craft your 10-minute and your 90 seconds. Judges?
I can jump in. So first of all, I wanted to compliment all of you on the way that you presented your thoughts and your talking points. I did not feel that you were reading at all. I felt that you practiced very well, and the way that you projected your voice, the pacing and the toning was wonderful. You didn't lose me throughout the slides, which is great. The opening of the presentation I thought was compelling. It drew me in very quickly. And I also felt that the way that the slides were presented, they were not very busy. They were very simple. And that allowed me to follow your talking points and really stay engaged with you. So I just wanted to give those overall compliments to the whole team. I had a quick question for you, is that Well, first I'll share my first initial thought was I'm kind of surprised at this dilemma because my background is actually in organizational culture, and I've always used Google as a shining example, as a model to the organizations that I've been coaching along the way. And the reason is that they did that 3-year study, right? Project Aristotle, I'm sure you're familiar with, that brought about like what makes a high performing team, and psychological safety was a top characteristic. Again, being that speak up culture is the reason what causes innovation and inclusion. And so the fact that this is coming up, and they were the founding people of Project Aristotle that basically said we need a speak up culture, kind of like confused me for a second. And then Google came up with Project Oxygen, which is all about governance and communication. That was also very popular. So just the topic itself kind of took me a second to kind of really figure out like, okay, are they really going through this? Of course they are, big company. The second point, and I don't know if this is more feedback or just an idea, is that your recommendation to go bottom up, I didn't feel was practical in an organization that's so bureaucratic and very hard to change. I was wondering if you considered the idea of changing Google's values as an organization so everybody still has the same values, but just reprioritize them. I thought it was a great idea, but maybe not so segmenting because they are so spread out, geographically and otherwise. I was wondering if you thought about that in your recommendations.
So coming on to the value part, like we were thinking about this open culture, which drives innovation, like you have said, right? So the initial thought was that if there is no open culture, if people are not talking about things, if we change the values, it will take away that open culture kind of image out of Google, and it will be a different company. Even though Google has been significantly changed after their founders have kind of left the CEO position and they have put in a different person, they are focusing more on business, driving business, and like the 20% of the free time which was given to the employees to work on the projects which they liked, it has also disappeared. So like we wanted to create this sense of open culture which was already there. Mm-hmm. We want people to still have that sense so that they can kind of interpret the values in a different way with the image of that open culture. That's why we did not change it. But yeah, like it could be a good suggestion.
I would just add on to that too.
Quickly, please.
Oh, sorry, I'll be quick. Yeah, so just to add on, we thought that coming in as consultants and changing an organization's values didn't make a ton of sense just because we don't work there. We're not the people that live these values day to day. So we felt that it was really important to have the employees involved in that process. And, maybe there's a top-down way that you could still have that feedback, but we figured that if you want everybody to get involved and feel this, instead of having it just be another iteration, and these values have been since Google's creation, basically. So that was kind of our concern with that, is like wanting it to be coming from the employees.
Got it. Okay.
Great. Let's get some feedback from Nuria or Irina, either one.
Okay, if you want, I would like to give my feedback. I agree with Shivani. I like very much your presentation. I think that all of you sound very professional and you speak very relaxed and quiet, and it's something that it was interesting. I was focused on the presentation and I don't have my mind out of so it's something that I really thank you. And I would like to remark some things of your presentation, and is that you repeat again once and again and again words like contribute, values, culture, individuals, and it's something that very important for me, because something that I have to think about it. As a member of the senior management team now, I'm thinking about what the culture of our group is and what we have to do in order that individuals contribute more for the changings of our values, or how to do that our group be more ethical. So thank you very much for that. Repeating this kind of words, I have been involved in the problem and with important topics. And it's something that now I have to think about it, So thank you very much for letting me think about it, because now I know that we have a problem and that we have to do something for changing. With regard to the solutions proposed, I fully agree with you that about the steps, about the procedures that we have to put in place in order to improve our ethical issues. So very good presentation, very well done.
Thank you. Irina?
Yes, I'm in full agreement with the great presentation skills, guys. I was impressed. I was completely in with you, 100% all the time. I quite liked the way you have showcased the dissonance between values and what the employees may think. This a couple of the thought process showcasing was quite nice idea. I also found that number of the solutions which you have suggested are really very good ones. Those of which organizations are currently thinking in reality. So, for example, like the examples of rewarding ethical behaviors you have mentioned. This is a continuous conversation we are having in our organization. For example, how to do that, right? Also, with starting the meetings with reminding on the values, or in any conversations, decision-making process, coming back to the values. That's something that organizations are discussing right now and actually working towards. So very on spot. And empathetic leadership, I think, is something which you also kind of didn't mention explicitly, but I think it was going that direction, right? It's about leaders taking ownership, leading with empathy, really understanding the employees, listening. So this is something which is like a great trend as well. I think that what I would also agree with Shibani on is on this top-down or versus down-top approach. Yeah, because to be honest, the exercises about running the workshop across the teams, defining the values, communication is very costly. In reality, when the organization has this global scale, it's really extremely difficult in implementation. Even the surveys which organizations are running, like pulse surveys on the annual basis, are so expensive and take so much of the effort of the teams working on that actually running something even bigger than that would be really difficult, really tough for any global company. So my thought was that actually it could be a solution to the problem which you have been sharing with us today, is explaining to the employees on how to live Google values actually in practice. Yeah, because the set of values might be correct. The problem comes is when someone is misinterpreting it. That, for example, you need to do things fast. Then it means that you can break some rules, or not necessarily follow all the policies. So explaining how to live values on the same examples, like through the leaders, again, was what you were showing as one of the options, that leaders talk to their teams, that in the teams they are discussing how to. So that may be also a solution. Instead of changing the values, showing in every single team how in this team it would look like to live Google values, or how in that team it would look like. So it could be a cheaper version of what you have suggested. But overall, guys, I'm really impressed with the presentation. Great ideas. The set of the presentation slides, really cool. And would I be in Google, I would take those slides and review them once again, at my own time, definitely. So thanks a lot. It was great.
Good. Just one more comment. Our next group starts in 15 minutes. So just one comment. Over the years, like the other judges, I judged in both graduate and undergraduate divisions. And with your presentation, I had to remind myself that I was in undergrad. I'm thinking, wait a minute, am I in grad right now? Because your level of analysis was really stellar. And the fact that you really got in there and looked at stuff. That's what it is about business ethics. It isn't always about answers. It's about analysis and getting in there and really looking at things. I love the fact that you talked about dissonance and the dissonance between stated and values in practice. I think dissonance is an excellent word to use in ethics, and always talking about the push and the pull, because that's where it is with that. It's always pushing, pulling, whatever. Nothing's ever cut and dried. I would say if something is completely cut and dried, you don't have a business ethics issue. You have a legal issue or something else, but it is the gray area that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and we really appreciate it. We hope that you've gotten some nice input for you to use on your 10-minute and your 90-second. And thank you to our judges. And the judges will now go and fill out some scoring sheets now, and we'll be looking at those a little later on. But it's just been a pleasure working with you, and thank you very much for all the time that you've put in, and we will look forward to seeing you tomorrow with your 10-minute.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep in touch.
Thank
LinkedIn.
you. Goodbye. Sure.